A building has been destroyed in Kwara State after a reported drone bomb incident that occurred hours after the United States announced airstrikes on ISIS-linked terrorists in Nigeria's northwest. A video shared widely on social media showed the damaged structure with residents filming debris they claimed were remnants of a drone bomb. Eyewitnesses said a loud explosion was heard moments before the building was hit. The development followed an announcement by U.S. President Donald Trump that American forces had carried out airstrikes targeting ISIS terrorists in Sokoto State. However, as of the time of filing this report, Nigerian authorities has not confirmed whether the Ofa incident was a separate attack or linked to debris from the earlier strikes in the northwest. For more perspective on this, we're joined by Director General, International Institute of Professional Security, Dr. Tony Ofoyetan, and he joins me virtually. Dr. Tony, thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate you for coming on. I know I butchered something there, but in the spirit of Christmas, please forgive me. Compliments of the season to you. Let's look at the significance of what we're seeing now. The joint efforts by U.S. and Nigeria, the U.S. airstrikes, is it weakening ISIS operations in northwest Nigeria from a security standpoint? Does it have any significance?
Well, it's not weakening. Thank you for having me and the compliment of the season. It's not actually weakening, depending on how we handle it. If we handle it with high level of sustenance, as the U.S. is trying to help us clear our forest and the hideout of the terrorists, naturally what is expected is for them to move into the city, which is relatively remote for U.S. to think of bombing, let me put it like that, and also mingle with the people, and as much as possible also move to the southern part of the country, which for now is said to be relatively less vulnerable in terms of their activities compared to what is happening in the north generally. So if the government is able to be proactive to understand that, look, one, you prevent their exodus from that very region, and secondly, the southern, the southwest and the southeastern governors must all come unanimously together to be able to look at how to ensure that they don't have the influx, the backlash of those that are going to be going out of the forest, those that are going to be going out of their hiding places, is most likely going to be within the southwest and, of course, the southeast. So if they are proactive enough to understand that, look, it's not as if the terrorists are going to be waiting for any bomb to come and hit them. They will be on the run. They will be they will be moving. So if they are moving definitely to places they believe are safe for them. So the Amotekun, this is time for them to work. The Bebegu, this is the time for them to work. All governments in the south generally, and of course the northern governors generally, the 19 northern states, should be able to understand that this has nothing to do with religion or religiosity. This is something that we must all put hands on deck. Good enough that it is not a unilateral decision by the United States of America. From what we have read, that the federal government is actively involved and coordinating the whole activity, which gives us some level of peace of mind. That means that whatever attack that is being launched now, it's coordinated and, of course, in the know by the federal government. So if that is the case, then the northern governors should come all out to support this cause. Terrorism is cancerous. There's no two way about it. The sound of the bullet does not know any religion, neither does it know any ethnicity. So all governors, all security agencies and the like must think about strategizing now to ensure that there is minimal, if not zero, level of civilian casualty is very, very important. And of course, ensure that the terrorists do not have heaven in the cities among the people now. Then, of course, those people that are coming to public and say things that may be very demoralizing against this campaign, the government should be intentional about them. And I think the media too should also lessen the issue of giving platform to those that we know that are going to be saying things that would, demoralize the military, demoralize this campaign against terrorism.
Right.
There is no country anywhere in the world that survives on the instrumentality of terrorism.
But,
not to talk of fellow Nigerians and people coming into public to come and defend the act of terrorism. I heard when you said somebody, Gumi was saying that this is going to escalate and all those stuff. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think it's the best. Yes, please.
Right. Away from security, right? Pray tell, how does this airstrikes, this U.S. airstrikes, reshape Nigeria and the U.S. diplomatic and political relations? What are we looking at in terms of diplomacy moving forward?
No, the diplomatic part of it is not something that is going to be, I don't see it as lasting too long, because Donald Trump is a businessman. There are compromises that I expect that the federal government would be able to come to terms with that would change the narrative as far as our diplomatic relationship is concerned. But for me, the most important thing for me now is the protection of the lives and property of Nigerians. So if without prejudice to our diplomatic relationship with the U.S., if what the U.S. is doing today will eventually lead to the overall security and safety of our people, for goodness sake, I think we should support it. But if it is such that the government, having understood the signature of where it's going, is going to boomerang, then we should begin to reappraise it. But for the issue of, we already have a very unpleasant diplomatic relationship. Nigeria can only go to US on single entry for 3 months visa now. So just imagine if you're a businessman that have been frequenting in and out of America, you just imagine how many times you have to go to the embassy and all those stuff like that. Recently, you also saw what happened with respect to the green card, and saw also the issue of a Nigerian ambassador, U.S. ambassador to Nigeria being one of the countries being recalled and all those stuff like that. I think Donald Trump is actually trying to hit government hard with respect to business relationship concessions.
Right.
So if the government thinks that the concession is purely economic concession that will have a symbiotic relationship, go ahead. But if it's something that is one-sided, I think government should think twice.
I mean, I dare argue that we left our doors open, right? And concerted efforts for our military to tackle terrorism brought us to this point, right? But very quickly, I have to bring in someone as well to join this conversation to make it more robust. Joining me is Basil Abia, is a co-founder, Truva Intelligence. He joins me live. Mr. Abia, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate you for coming on, right? I don't know if you caught the first half of this discussion. We've talked about whether or not this airstrikes would significantly weaken ISIS network in the northwest of Nigeria, and whether or not this would have some sort of implications on diplomacy between the two nations. But let's look at the peace-building perspective of this. Do the airstrikes help or hinder long-term conflict resolution in affected communities? Basil.
Thank you for the earlier insights that were shared by the other analyst. I have to say that according to available open source intelligence available to me right now, that's available to almost everybody. It's open source intelligence, obviously. The targets that the strikes hit actually were missed. Most of those the targets, ISIS targets, were actually missed in Sokoto State, according to open source intelligence that just dropped 15 minutes ago. They are expected strikes in the coming days, mostly carried out by the UAV MQ Reaper, the famed attack drone that the US Army has. And they will definitely strike in the coming days, is obvious. For some background context for the audience, there has been ISR activity carried out by the US Africa Command, the AFRICOM, since late October, hovering over Niger State, over Kwara State, over Sokoto State, Kebbi State, and of course over Borno. So expect a lot more of these military strikes to hit ISIS targets and bandit groups in north-central Nigeria, in north-west Nigeria, as we have seen last night, and in northeast Nigeria, particularly around the Lake Chad Islands. Now to your question, to the crux of your question, like I mentioned earlier, it's very difficult to tell for now, especially with the context that the strikes last night actually missed all, if not some, if not all, of the ISIS targets in Sokoto State and that particular part of Sokoto State. So it's going to be really hard to tell. Surface-to-surface missiles was the actual technology that was used for the strike yesterday from a home port missile guider called USS Paul Ignatius. It's a U.S. naval asset that carries out these surface-to-surface missile attacks. And most likely the location was actually off the coast of Spain. That's where the USS Paul Ignatius actually home ports. The home port is called Rota in Spain. So there's going to be a lot of variety in that context. You're going to see some drone military attacks from the US as well, due to the ISR that they've carried out. And for those who do not know, ISR is basically intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. That's what ISR means. So you have certain planes that are quite silent when they're in the air and can carry as much photographic and geospatial information about a particular location. So they have all of the data. I am circumspect with the information that Nigerian military authorities also shared with them data. If they shared any data with the American authorities, it is most likely human intelligence, HUMINT, what in international security is called HUMINT. But in terms of actual high-level intelligence or ISR data, most of that was carried out by the US Africa Command, which is stationed, obviously, as we know, in Germany. And they have some of their assets. They mostly use aviation infrastructure by Ghana, owned by Ghana in nearby Ghana. So those planes actually take off from Ghana and spend hours in the air carrying out those ISR activity, and then they come back. They obviously almost immediately transmit the intelligence to either the Pentagon or to the US Africa Command in Germany. Right. Again, like I mentioned, it's going to be very hard to tell whether this would help or hinder the peace efforts, the peace building efforts in northwest and northeast Nigeria. So
if you're saying that the targets missed, or the missiles missed the targets, it begs to ask a question about the intelligence itself. What does intelligence and coordination gaps, reveal about this counterterrorism strategy that Nigeria has adopted with collaborating with the U.S.? How did they miss their targets?
Well, like I said, this is just new information that is dropping 15 minutes ago, open source. So we're going to need a lot of time. That's the thing with these kinetic interventions. You need a lot of time to know what the losses are, what the fatalities are, and right now what we know is that most of the targets were missed. This is not to say that this is atypical of this sort of attacks. These attacks are most likely lethal. They're very effective, especially surface-to-surface missile guides. Like the USS Paul Ignatius is actually a missile guide system, right? So they're very accurate most of the time. I'm actually surprised to see that information out there that the targets were missed. But like I mentioned, you're going to have more drone attacks from the MQ Reaper, and the MQ Reaper has a very, I would say, very effective history in terms, if you look at the fatality rates whenever the US or the Americans deploy the MQ Reaper. So the information is that they're going to deploy the MQ Reaper mostly around the northeast, and the surface-to-surface missile systems will be deployed in the northwest and probably in the north central, particularly in Kwara and Niger State. We should expect more attacks. This is open source information as well. The Department of War Secretary Pete Hegseth had actually posted it on X last night, immediately after the attacks, that, and I quote, more to come. So this is from their own source, that they are going to attack more. And even if he didn't post that, if you had followed, anyone who had followed the open source intelligence coverage of Americans' intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance activity over Nigerian territory since late October, you would tell that they were trying to be, and they are still trying to be, very meticulous about getting as much data as possible about these enemy positions before striking. So if they only struck Sokoto State, be rest assured that they will try striking other locations that they have done their ISR, like Niger State, like Kwara, like Borno. And as aforementioned, we still have to give it some time to know whether they were actual fatalities, what the losses were on the enemy positions. And if there were no losses, you can expect more effective strikes in the coming days.
Right. more effective strikes in the coming, whether effective, we do not know, but there will be strikes, right, coming in the following days. And so I do have to ask about, the balance, how this would change the involvement of the U.S. military in this airstrikes. Would it change the balance against insurgent groups, or will it sort of signal deeper security challenges? What do you foresee this will happen in the future?
So the two likely scenarios. If the strikes are effective, it's now the responsibility of Nigeria's military authorities to carry out mop-up exercises. Obviously, mop-up exercises means that if they are fleeing ISIS or bandit targets, those who fled from the attacks, who were lucky to escape, maybe some escaped with a lost limb or something, the mop-up exercises ensures that they're neutralized or they're taken in, into custody, right? That has to be done. That's the kinetic engagement that only ground level activity allows for, because if America's counterterrorism strategy with regard to Nigeria is only precision strikes, it means that they cannot do ground exercises. So the ground exercises has to come from Nigerian military authorities, and then outside of that, the efficacy of this counterterrorism strategy will only be maintained or attained if we now start following up with peace building and stabilization exercises. So that is the non-kinetic measure.
Right.
So for any of these kinetic measures to be effective, you need the non-kinetic measure to follow immediately. And what does that mean? That means you're going into the communities that were affected by the violence of these terror groups. You're making sure that there is no propensity for these victims to now turn into being terrorists. In fact, one of my first published work actually in terrorism is actually studying the propensity of certain populations to actually become radicalized and join these terror groups, especially in northern Nigeria. Yeah. And we covered the evolution of the Metatene to Boko Haram. We covered the propensity of the Almajere to join these radicalized groups, and become terrorists.
Right.
So that is the work of a number of ministries outside of the Ministry of Defense. We need, for instance, we have the Ministry of Humanitarian Services. They have to come in and carry out those humanitarian work. We also need the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Information and National Orientation to also come in and make sure that the populations are well aware, first and foremost, that these things are not good things to indulge in, one. And two, that the youths and the vulnerable amongst these populations are well engaged. When they're well engaged socioeconomically, the propensity for them to become terrorists, sympathizers, or even terrorists themselves actually reduces. So that's the first scenario, and that's the best case scenario.
Okay.
The worst case scenario is that you have these strikes. These strikes are not effective, and then federal government doesn't carry out effective mop-up exercises, and then unfortunately we don't even do non-kinetic measures. The situation just gets worsened. So I'm hoping that the best case scenario is actually what happens.
Okay, let me quickly bring in Dr. Tony here, and I'm just going to ask the team to pull up the tweet that we saw there for President Donald Trump, where he said, "God bless the military and Merry Christmas to everyone, to all, including the terrorists." If you can pull that up there, because at the core of that messaging was that he is saying that this protection is for the Christians. Guys, can we pull up that tweet exactly? So see there, "May God bless our military and Merry Christmas to all, including the dead terrorists, of which there will be many more if their slaughter of Christians continues." And so at the core of this is the protection of Christians, right? And he continues to frame this strike as protecting Christians. So, Doctor, I do have to ask you, how might this narrative affect Nigeria's already fragile religious balance? Very quickly, because we're pressed for time.
Personally, I feel a little bit uncomfortable when religion is brought to play there. It would have been more comfortable and more suiting if we talk basically on, fight against terrorists, irrespective of their religious faith. But I also understand the fact that most probably the pressure is coming from the Christian faith, whose religion, whose churches, homes, and the like have been destroyed, and maybe they were fortunate to have the ear of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump now having that as also a good means through which to enter into the government, avail himself of that very rare opportunity. So whether we like it or not, of course, he's right to some extent, but in terms of Nigerian politics, the way we play things, the religious faith here, I think it is more suiting to talk about, the war against terrorists. It will still achieve the same goal at the end of the day, rather than just narrowing it to protecting Muslim Christians. There are non-Christians and non-Muslims that have been caught in this web of terrorism. So anything that has to be done to wipe out the terrorists, to me, it's a welcome development, except for the fact that the government must be involved and must now draw that line of demarcation.
Right. Gentlemen, I must say thank you for taking out the time to join us. Basil Abia, thanks again coming in from Truva Intelligence, and also to Dr. Tony as well, who is just very important to this discussion. He is the Director General, International Institute of Professional Security. Once again, gentlemen, thank you for coming. I appreciate you.